Yes, Sir Hairless here. So last night I actually watched the first Lord of the Rings film because of this song, this reaction that I knew I was going to be doing. And I know it's a crime that I have not actually seen any of the Lord of the Rings films. So at least now I have watched the first one and I will be watching the others soon. Anyway, why I say that is because this song is not actually in it. And I'm not going to lie, when I finished the film, I'd completely forgotten that the reason I was watching it was for this song. I was pretty engrossed in it, let's put it that way. So I kind of panicked and thought, oh, Sir Hairless, you don't even remember this song. What have you been doing? I tried Googling, couldn't find much. And it turns out this was just in the book, not in the film. There is a group that has kind of created the music for the song, because I don't know how we'd know what a song sounds like in a book. And the group is called Clamavi de Profundis, which means from the depths I cry. It's a phrase used in a lot of older, for example, Renaissance music, which you know is some of my favorite. Extremely emotional, and the phrase is used to depict anguish and suffering. So it's a nice name for a group who have made a nice song. I've just listened to it a few times. Let's see what Geoff does with it here.
The world was young, the mountains green, no stain yet on the moon was seen. No words were laid on stream or stone when Durin woke and walked alone. He named the nameless hills and dells. He drank from yet untasted wells. He stooped and looked in mirror, and saw a crown of stars appear as gems upon a silver thread above the shadow of his head. The world was fair, the mountains tall, in elder days before the fall of mighty kings.
Really nice harmonies and arrangement. That is about the harmonies. Please do go and listen to the original by Clamavi de Profundis. And here I am taking shortcuts by saying the word nice instead of some more detailed adjectives. But it is just nice, and Geoff is clearly aware of it. Of course, when it comes to music, everything is opinion. But I am saying objectively, it's a nice song. And Geoff has really encapsulated this notion. I think I'm going to listen to this one all the way through and we'll do the analysis afterwards. But just quickly, I'll maybe play a couple of clips of the original so we can see. I was debating in the introduction of this video whether to show some of the original, use some musical examples, because I was going to say how the arrangement, the way it's constructed, lends itself really heavily to the harmony, to the singing, which isn't an obvious thing because it's not a cappella. Maybe a bit more obvious if we know the story and consider the story here, the dwarves. Anyway, let me show a couple of clips.
The world was young, the mountains green.
Starts off like that if I skip ahead a bit.
Silver thread above the shadows.
We get harmony, but the melody is now doubled up in unison. Move forward a bit. We have a beat now, things have grown a bit, so maybe Geoff will do something similar later on. We'll find out. And then further later on, now towards the end.
Beneath the mountains, music walks.
This is an example where it's a rich sound. There are many more layers than we probably think there are. Really rich harmony, whilst it seems very subtle, very almost a bit reserved. So I like the stylistic choices Geoff has made so far. Let's carry on.
In Nargothrond and Gondolin, who now beyond the western seas have passed away. The world was fair in Durin's day.
Little beat coming in. I just turned on the subtitles. Apologies, they won't be there for the first minute or so.
The king he was on carven throne in many pillared halls of stone, with golden roof and silver floor and runes of power upon the door. The light of sun and star and moon and shining lamps of crystal hewn, undimmed by cloud or shade of night, that shone forever fair and bright. Their hammer on the endless bought, their chisel clove and graver wrote, their forged was blade and bound was hilt, the delver mined, the mason built, their pearl, pearl and opal mail, and metal wrought like fish's mail, buckler and corselet, axe and sword, and shining spears were laid in unwearied.
Yeah, he's loving the suspensions in this one. Such good textural choices, the instruments that he's choosing to use. Now, I know that they're probably done in music software of sorts rather than having an actual chamber orchestra playing for him. But as I was listening to that last minute or so, when we get the strings coming in and the inspirational beats that you would find in games, that was the imagery in my head. I was thinking, oh, this would fit so well in an adventure game set in a mythical world or a medieval world or something. And then the contrast of where we've just arrived with the drops and the silence and the nothing, everything completely reduced. For a tiny bit of context, in case you don't know, just like I wouldn't have until I watched the film yesterday, I've also never read any of the books. It is an inspirational song. They're on an adventure, a quest, a mission, but at this point they've just found ruins of a tomb. So things are quite eerie, and that's no doubt a challenge of this song, having this eerie element, these sad undertones, whilst also having inspiration laden throughout the music.
Unwearied then were Durin's folk, beneath the mountain music woke. The harpers harped, the minstrels sang, and at the gates the trumpets rang. The world is grey, the mountains old, the forge is fire, is ashen cold. No harp is rung, no hammer falls, the darkness dwells in Durin's hall. The shadow lies upon his tomb, in Moria, in Khazad-dûm, but still the sunken stars appear in dark and windless mirror. There lies his crown in water deep, till Durin wakes again from sleep.
Yeah, one of the first things that came to mind is when the other dwarfs, I guess, do enter. These are the ones from The Hobbit who aren't in the film. I understand The Hobbit came before The Lord of the Rings, and this is about, well, this tomb that they find is the ancient dwarven colony, I guess, where everything is in ruin, as we can see by the very nice set here. So the introduction, the other dwarves come in. I was thinking, oh, that's magical. They fade in, you know, that's not something I would have expected to see. And then they fade out at the end. I'm thinking, are these the dwarves who battled here and perished many years previously. I could be way off the mark, but you know, it gets me thinking, especially for someone who's only seen the first film. I have seen bits of some of the Hobbit films, but I don't really remember the storyline too well. And as someone with an affiliation to the soundtrack of one of the Hobbit films, that's probably not a good thing. Anyway, this is not about the Lord of the Rings and Hobbit stories. As we are aware, I like to dig into the music a little bit. So let's go ahead and do that now. Let's take it back to the beginning. I mentioned before the scene is created, especially with these water droplets, which are actually interesting in and of themselves. I was thinking towards the end when we also got them, but also during the song.
Hark, the minstrel sang, and at the gate.
It's the same number of drop sounds that we hear. Each one is not unique, like every single snowflake in the world might be, for example. And therefore, if we want to get into the real nitty-gritties of it, the drops do have musical pitches. They're not in the same key as the song. So even though it's an extremely small level, they do have a harmonic function. They are providing dissonance. Also, rhythmic dissonance, if we want to think of it like that. They're coming in not perfectly on the beats or at perfect intervals. Maybe they are at perfect intervals with each other, actually. Not too sure. But their infrequency does add a little bit of unrest underneath the music. They stop now.
The mountains old, the forge's fire is at.
When you get this rich harmony in the cello, the lower strings, the idea of growth on a more micro level as opposed to the macro level where we'd see growth throughout the whole song. Yes, I'm aware people are not as weird as me and when listening to this are hearing the droplets in the background, but at that point we stopped hearing them and suddenly I found myself immersed in a different way than I thought I might have been. Listening for droplets, they stop. What has replaced them? Oh, as I'm listening out for them, I'm now hearing the cello, and in a way, the cello is more impactful, at least to me. Okay, that's a bit of a strange digression. I did not think I'd be talking about droplets so much, but what is done is done. Let us continue. I like the first bit of music we get, this really low drone note. We all know Geoff's range is infinite. So I was thinking, oh, is that him? It could be anything, especially in the age of technology. So I'm not going to say what instrument it is or synthetic version of an instrument it is, but it sets the scene. It acts as a drone. I've spoken about drones a lot before, especially I feel with these types of songs. To pick some topical ones I've done, Geoff's Icy Fire, we have the same characters in there. There are many musical similarities to that for obvious reasons, in terms of instrumentation, in terms of texture, in terms of harmony, melodic range, that kind of thing. And also Peter Hollins with Tim Faust, Misty Mountains. If you'd like to check out my videos on either of these, my a cappella playlist will be up here. So this drone at the bottom, it's quite intense. It doesn't move, which means that the harmony in a weird kind of way is limited or locked in. If you have one note that refuses to move, any other movement will naturally cause dissonance and of course resolution, so it works both ways.
Green, no stain yet on the moon was seen.
And I swear I can feel overtones as well. The first thematic change we get comes here.
He named the name.
Emphasized by the light shining and then coming off. The third Geoff over here is still kind of fading in, but this is what I mean when I spoke about richness earlier. This is a really rich arrangement. We're hearing many more than just 3 parts already.
He named the nameless hills and dells.
Maybe not many more, that was a bit of an exaggeration, but more voices than we can see people or dwarves. This is an interesting phrase. He named the nameless hills. Let's have a listen to where the pause comes off.
He named the nameless hills and dells.
That's irregular in terms of phrasing. He named the nameless, and it's certainly interesting, at least from a phrasing perspective. It's things like this which I do consider a bit irregular that really grab my attention when listening to songs like this. And of course when it comes to arrangements, because all arrangements are, I suppose by definition, well, technically they are changing, rearranging a song, making it different in the cover artist's unique way. This is our 6th video and therefore 6th time hearing Geoff's solo works, and by now I have a pretty good idea to assume that we will have these irregular things that don't make sense by paper definitions.
He drank from yet untasted will.
There, the same thing, a break mid-phrase, but it's consistent with what we've just heard. We're getting familiarity from something that should maybe seem a bit unfamiliar. And just to change it up that little bit, what happens? We get a suspension. That part.
Drank from yet untasted will.
Leading into this bang and all the lights go out. It's just things that we don't really expect. Then in comes Geoff number 4. We've already seen a fair bit of range, to be fair. The melody just before that.
Drank from yet
It's not too low.
Stooped and looked in mirror, mirror.
Another suspension, this time in the melody. We don't often get suspensions in the melodies. Usually they're found in the harmonic accompanying parts. So there's an example of 2 suspensions back to back. I won't point out anymore because there are quite a lot, but do have a listen out for them if you go and listen to this on your own. A nice way of getting some temporary dissonance, which then resolves at the end of the phrase for a feeling of, resolution. What does that lead into? Nice, unstandard chords now.
And saw a crown of stars appear.
I think that phrase actually was an unresolved suspension. That note in there, which we would expect to resolve. But no, it stays, which creates a chord of
Stars appear.
This is the chord, and then that note. The supertonic note number 2. So we're 1 minute in, 1 minute and 4 seconds to be exact. And what have we heard so far? Different ranges sung by different characters, different instruments heard, a cappella versus non-a cappella, scenic sound effects, lighting changes, harmonic tools such as suspensions, both resolving and not resolving, resulting in a prolonged feeling of dissonance versus the suspensions that do resolve, which are, well, resolution. But all the while things are very calm. There's no choreography. They're standing there completely still. Things do seem quite serene. And right now you're probably thinking, oh no, Sir Hairless, the music obviously changes quite significantly later on. And if you've been speaking this much about this little in the music, well, we'll be here all day. Don't worry. I know I'm not going to be speaking about everything, but with the handful of Geoff arrangements that I've seen so far of his solo works, and let's be real, it applies to voice play as well. I love listening out for everything because everything is so calculated. I see it as a bit of a challenge, and yes, I can still enjoy the music, don't worry. Well, let's continue, and anything obvious or interesting I'll point out. To be fair, the very next phrase I find interesting. This.
As gems upon a silver thread.
The harmony is constantly this battle between standard and modern, non-standard. I'm using those terms quite generally, but hopefully you get my point here. I can't say conclusively what the effect is. It will affect you differently to me, but it's just really enhancing the idea of old versus new, perhaps mythical versus real. Of course, it's from a fictional land, but we would consider this some sort of medieval time. Yet the production made with technology, very modern, and we get elements of that in the harmony. Also, Geoff singing with himself, his voice blends so well with himself, and the resultant sound is a almost synthetic type of sound. It doesn't sound all that natural.
Gems upon a silver thread.
Which is just the nature of you singing with yourself. You blend with yourself best out of any other voice in the world, especially in his upper registers. I've noted his timbre is so good for blending with other high Geoffs. Many parts, volume reduced. So yeah, just a rich sound, rich harmonies, which contrasts the other phrases, such as the immediately consecutive one.
Of the shadow of his head.
And the instrument in the background here, strange.
Of his head.
I don't know how to explain that or describe that one. Really nice parts of the harmony are the higher parts of Geoff that we can hear, such as in this phrase.
Fair the mountains tall.
At the top, not moving, not really an inverted drone. Drones tend to last for a significant amount of time, but that's the part that doesn't move whilst the other harmony changes. I think it has a bit of a softer feel as opposed to having one of the lower bass parts having this sustained note. Of course, it wouldn't be a Geoff video without the subhuman lownesses.
The world was fair in Durin's day.
There where we get the beat in, suddenly there's this energy that's been injected into the music. It's not just because of the beat and the tempo increasing. Intrinsically, the time signature, the rhythms have changed. We've gone from common time beforehand, thinking in terms of 1, 2, 3, 4, now to
with golden roof and silver floor and
1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Thinking in threes rather than in twos or fours. That naturally allows for a bit more lilt to the music. The beat obviously helps keeping things moving. The harmony is still rich, very much in the same style as we saw earlier on without the beat.
star and moon and shining lamps of crystal hue.
Da, 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 dum. That's, you know, similar to a hemiola, a temporary change to thinking in terms of the other time signature. And there is a sound coming in, very modern and synthetic sounding, coming in just in the background.
Out or shade of night,
Did you hear it there? To this pitch, kind of like a
out or shade of night, the show.
and then it goes. I heard a tiny bit earlier on for a fraction of a second. It's almost like Geoff is teasing us with these noises that we can hear now and then if we just listen out for them. Like he's saying, yes, this is a modern arrangement, but only in certain places at certain times. Otherwise, the feel is, well, dwarves on a mythical adventure finding the ruins of a tomb.
And bound was hilt, the delver mind, the maid.
Sound grown in so many ways, consistent string rhythms. Ch 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 ch. You had swords clashing.
Mail and metal wrought like fish's mail.
The temporary change in time, leading into what? An unresolved chord at the end of the phrase.
Buckler and corselet, axe and sword and shining spears were laid.
Nice feeling of camaraderie. You kind of want to join them, don't you? You want to become a dwarf and join them on their adventure.
Beneath the mountain, music woke.
I'd definitely join them if they said every night before bed we'll sing a little song like this in harmony.
Sunken stars appear in dark and windless mirror.
More stylistic changes, and I spoke a bit about the end previously. The one thing that I will say that I'm noticing the more I listen to it is that sometimes the change between the sections, I think, does seem a little bit sudden, and that could be just to exaggerate the differences that we're hearing. That's basically instrumental accompaniment into a cappella accompaniment, and the contrast is stark. We notice it. It's exaggerated. Personally, I think this is kind of like an a cappella way of arranging. I've spoken about this in many of my a cappella videos, I'm sure, so I won't repeat myself. But from my experience with listening to a cappella music, you do get these sudden contrasts happening much more frequently than in normal instrumental music. Very generally speaking, of course, this is just what I've noticed from the music I've done on this channel.
Wakes again from sleep.
And finishing on the open fifth. If we move it up the octave to make it easier to hear, open fifth means it's missing the third note. The third note is the one that determines if it's major or minor. So the open fifth, ambiguous. There is no major happy or minor sad ending definitively. The other dwarves have vanished. He's still in the ruins, but also it's just quite an archaic sound used in a lot of older music from many, many centuries ago. Yeah, I really liked that. I like the original song. I like Geoff's arrangement, the respect he's shown to the original song by matching it stylistically in so many ways, but in true Geoff style, making it his own. And of course, it's given me a reason to watch the Lord of the Rings film, the first one. So numbers 2 and 3, here I come. Let me know down below if you're a keen Lord of the Rings fan, the books, the films, how disappointed you are in me that I have not seen them yet. I enjoy watching my films with a hot chocolate, so if you'd like to donate me a hot chocolate or two, you can do so at the Buy Me a Coffee link below. Or if you'd like to join the community, get access to exclusive content not on YouTube, you can click on the Patreon linked on the screen now, and I will see you next time.